One for us, two for her.
It's not on just yet. We still have a quorum of the first committee, so you're okay.
All right. The January 31st, 2020 committee meetings are called to order. Dr. Bale, the Academics Affairs Committee is the person. All right. The Academic Affairs Committee has several items to bring forth this morning, and I think Madam Provost is here to explain a couple of certificate programs that have been proposed.
Morning. Morning.
Morning.
Try that again.
Good morning.
Grumble, grumble. Okay, I have two programs for approval this morning, and I'm going to ask Kevin, Director of the Chinese Flagship Program, to talk about the first. It's an undergraduate certificate in Chinese Studies.
The Chinese certificate is 21 hours. So 4 of the courses or 12 credit hours are in the Chinese language. The other 3 electives are in taught in English related to the culture or practices or traditions of China. So in the spring semester, we have a total of 210 or 220 students taking Chinese courses or Chinese language courses. We have about 80 Chinese majors. So we will really want to recruit the rest of the students who are taking Chinese to finish a certificate to help them mark themselves in the job market.
Anyone have any questions?
Do you have any idea how many students might be interested in this certificate?
Our goal is to recruit 10 to 15 students for the first year for 2020 to do the certificate. Hopefully we will grow that.
Okay, very good.
Seems an appropriate time to just ask the question, how many of our students are in China right now?
Yes, we have 3 students in China, and then they are flagship students doing internship. So they are they are returning to the States on Tuesday, February the 4th.
All right. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
In the second.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the undergraduate certificate in Chinese studies as presented. Further discussion? Not all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. And then we have.
And then we also have from the same Department of Modern Languages, the approval of undergraduate certificate in German studies. And I believe Dr. Laura McGee, who's the department head of modern languages, is going to talk about that certificate.
We would like WKU to be able to produce graduates here in the region who have a basic understanding of German language and a good understanding of German culture. We want this region to continue to be a place that is attractive for German investment. We've already benefited from that with the investment of Bildstein Cold Rolled Steel at the Trans Park and Windtalk in Franklin, and my consulting work for these two companies has indicated that cultural training and intercultural understanding is essential for the success of these companies as German management hires Kentuckians and wants to have a sustained plan for stimulating our economy in this region. So we want WKU graduates to be part of that.
Thank you for that presentation. Any comments or questions?
Well, as a German, of course, I do believe that speaking the German language is somewhat valuable. But I'm glad to see that the German department, the bachelor got canceled, and that there is a new foothold of German programs in the university. So I like that.
Certainly, these two languages and populations of people are very appropriate for us to have great interest in. Any other comments, questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Dr.
Second.
And a second. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Last item we have is an emeritus appointment, and Cheryl, I'll ask you to tell us about that.
Nominated for emeritus status is Dr. Donna Blackburn, Professor of Nursing. After receiving her undergraduate degrees in nursing from WKU, Professor Donna Blackburn earned her master's and doctoral degrees from Vanderbilt University. She joined the School of Nursing in 1986 and served as department head from 1999 to 2007, and then retired in May 2019. Dr. Blackburn received many academic honors and awards, including the WKU University Award for Public Service, and continues to serve on corporate boards and as a research consultant for healthcare systems.
I can make a comment about Dr. Blackburn. One of my colleagues that I work with every day trained under her, and it's nothing but glowing remarks. I think she's had a positive impact on many people in the healthcare industry. So, anyone have any other comments or questions? Not, I'll entertain a motion to approve of emeritus status for Dr. Donna Blackburn.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Okay. That concludes the items on our list. I would like to indulge everyone for just a minute to make a couple of personal comments concerning our recently deceased ex-interim president and provost, Barbara Birch. I first became aware and got to know Dr. Birch when my wife served on this board in the 1990s, early 1990s. She actually was interim president when my mother was given an honorary doctorate, and in later years, I had the privilege of serving on this board, and particularly closely on our presidential search committee. Barbara was a lady of great intellect and passion. She gave fully and freely to this university, and she is going to be missed. With that, up on the executive committee agenda is EX-1, authorization to purchase property at 1560 Laurel Street.
Good morning.
Good
Morning. I think I got a better reception. So Jeff, you're gonna pull up the PowerPoint for me. Okay, so as Regent McKinley said, we're seeking approval for the property purchase on Normal Street. So the star will show you where the property is located on campus. It's right across from our library, directly across the street. That's what the property looks like. You're probably wondering why we would want to purchase such a property. Well, it is adjacent to campus and it's unoccupied and really in bad shape. So the selling price is $113,000, and we would also cover closing cost. Basically, what we would do is take down the structure and construct a parking lot. There's actually 2 parking lots, one on each side of it. So this would just take that down and make one parking lot. So we're recommending that you give us approval to purchase this property.
All right. Does anybody have any questions?
I read what they initially were asking for the property, and this is quite a bit less. Can you assure us that this is the best bargaining price we could get?
I think so. Jennifer, do you?
Yeah,
Jennifer,
yeah.
too, this has been.
We actually have an agreement to purchase pending your approval and it is significantly less than what the original asking price was. It's pretty well in line with what the appraisal value was from the owner of the property.
And how much will the demolition cost?
I don't have an answer for that. I would get Brian Russell involved in that.
Typically, we're going
process.
to look about $6,000 to $7,000, have that property taken down. One of the things about the property, it has been on our master plan for years. It's a strategic piece of property. And so we have been looking and asking for in older past, and I think it is now held by 3 or 4 of his
It's in the estate.
but it would be a good opportunity for the university and get rid of a real eyesore that it's actually a hazard.
Yeah.
You cannot go inside the building because you fall through the floors. So it's strategic in nature, the property.
Yeah, I can think of lots of reasons why it would be a mistake not to buy it. I just want to feel like we're getting the price that we can get it for.
I think Brad Wheeler was working on this before he left the university.
He
And I
gave
think,
a presentation.
right, I think initially it was around 360,000 they were asking. So this is significantly less. And Brad, I remember one of the last things he told me before leaving, that he thought that this was about as low as we could get it.
It is an eyesore. I drove by there today. I'm on the way here, and it's one of those, I dare you to go in there. If I'd been in college and somebody dared me, I would be right in that doorway, sneaking around that building, checking it out. So I definitely think there's a liability issue too. So, and every time I drive by that, that's what I think about. It's just the big L, liability. And then it is such an eyesore when you're developing all that area across and doing all that construction and with the Helm Library. It just is not going to be, it definitely is better for us to buy it and tear it down and put a parking lot there.
Quick question. Will we proceed quickly to demolish it once the university owns it?
Absolutely. Right.
Regent McKinney, if I may also remind the regents that one of the things that we've shifted toward is really having a focus on acquiring and holding properties that are proximate. And given all the other opportunities around us, this one actually is the most proximate to campus. It does a couple of things longer term. In addition to parking, it creates a parcel that is large enough to do something other than parking with in the future. And it also is directly adjacent to sorority house. And there may be additional opportunities there in the future. So it's an important piece of land for the university.
questions or discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Next up on the agenda is EX-2, approval of annual salary recommendation for the president. Susan?
So this salary adjustment, I need to explain more closely because I think there is maybe some confusion around this. So this is a result of an IRS audit of the university's presidential residence. And basically, this is not uncommon. It's basically happening all over the United States that the IRS is coming in and auditing these types of issues. And so they're finding, this audit began in May of 2018 and concluded, I believe it was in December. And they identified this as a taxable non-cash benefit to the president. So what we did is some research. Christy Smith, our interim CFO, did some research as to how this has been handled by other universities. And we are handling it pretty much the same way that they all have. So the reason they deemed it non-cash, it says non-taxable, I'm sorry, that's a typo, a non-cash taxable benefit was it actually has to fall into these three things. We have to check the box for each of the three things. So the residence must be on campus. It is. It must be a contractual obligation, which it is. The contract that President Cavoni has requires that he lives in the resident. And then it has to be for the convenience of the employer, meaning can the president not do his job? Can he live someplace else and still conduct his job? The IRS ruled that the president could perform his duties and live basically any place in Warren County. So that's the one of the three requirements we did not meet. So they deemed it as taxable. So because of that, his taxes, he would basically take a pay cut of about $22,000 if we did not make this salary adjustment. So what we're doing is we're grossing up his salary by $22,500 in order for his net pay to remain the same that it is today. So it's no increase in net pay. It's only to cover the tax liability with the associated increase in the wages.
Thank you, Susan. Any questions or discussion?
Am I interpreting the tax liability on 22,500 is 18,000?
It's a circular calculation.
It's a circular
You gross it
calculation.
up, and then the amount you're paying to cover the tax is then taxable, so you pay tax on that additional amount. So then it's like a circular calculation. Every time you gross it up a little more, there's more tax than you gross it up a little more.
You're the CPA. That looks like a 75% tax rate for that.
So Jason told me this morning that he assured me he did the calculation when he saw it, and that this was spot on. So
That's why I don't do my tax.
So in essence, what we have is a situation where the president agreed to an employment contract. In that contract, upon agreement, this was a tax-free benefit. We were audited. This is now a taxable benefit.
Right.
I mean, I'm trying to make this a very quick encapsulated thing. And because we do not meet all three prongs of the three-prong definition by the IRS, if we do not change this, our contract, in essence, we're not fulfilling our end of the contract with the president.
exactly.
Now, is he gonna have to go back prior years to pay this? Are they gonna make it? No, so this is starting this year going forward?
Yes.
Was this passed with the same law that made contributions to the athletic department
No, I think this is always taxable fringe benefits have always been.
Yeah.
I think that we have always, or most universities have always said that it's for our convenience. The IRS is now disagreeing with that. So probably want some court cases.
Right. And as I said, this is happening at more and more universities. that they were able to check the 3 boxes all along, and now the IRS is disagreeing with that 3rd box.
So just from my perspective, so as a staff member, if I take a class, graduate class, undergraduate class, I'm responsible for my own tax liability on that class, but I'm electing to do that, right?
Exactly.
In
There's
this
no,
case, we are requiring the president to live in this residence. He cannot elect not to, correct? Based on the contract. Okay, so that's the big difference in us as staff and faculty being responsible for our own tax liability, and this not being in just
Right.
a
we take classes because we want to take classes, not because there's a contractual obligation.
I understand the logic, and I sympathize with it. If we would be in a situation where the university would be flush with money, I can see, yeah, we'll do that. But I just wanted to paint the picture how this looks like for a person who is just an employee at this university. So I want to paint several scenarios in terms of a faculty member. So a faculty member who wants to apply for promotion and tenure is required to give presentations at conferences. And well, the university tries to reimburse the faculty member for the expense, but you know, if I would look at my career the last, whatever, 20 years, how much do I get? Well, it's rare that you get 100%. Most of the time you get less. Sometimes, you know, at conferences in April, and you will be told, well, the funds have expired. There's no money left. And so you're required to do this, and you pay with this for after-tax money. Let me give you another example of similar things. Almost all faculty I know have a home office, okay? And this home office has been created by after-tax dollars. You could say, well, they don't need a home office. But at the same time, the university quite often chooses to not heat or cool the working offices which are provided. And so, yeah, you don't have much of a choice. And my last example is the following. For the last, I think, 3 years, beginning of the academic year, department asking the faculty, do you really need to have a phone? You could get rid of this phone, and that would save the department some money. I mean, you can use your cell phone if students want to contact you. You can use Skype, you can use a Google phone or whatever it is. And so from that perspective, right, faculty is used to essentially have lots of things where they use their own money. And as far as I can, where I'm sitting, you're required to do this, okay? And they don't have an opportunity to come to the board and say, oh, make my net salary whole again. That's just the way it is. And so, but I understand the logic, and I sympathize with a loss in salary. But there is no policy for any other employee to, you know, if IRS changes regulations, you take a hit, well, you just gotta live with it. The institution makes no attempt to make you whole again. And so I believe for most employees at this university, this will not create a lot of sympathy, but actually will look quite bad in terms of that we do this for somebody who is on the top of the food chain, but we don't do the same for almost anybody else.
So I want to be absolutely clear in my comments. I think it looks bad optically. What I'm concerned about is that we're in violation of a contract that the university agreed to if we don't do it. That's what I'm being told. If that is the case, we are acting outside of, it's not logic. I mean, it would be that we're acting outside of a contractual obligation. So we would be, if we do not do this, we are not fulfilling the contract that gives, we'll say it this way, the employee the power to say that we're in violation of the contract. That's what we're being presented with, correct? This is not it's not a justification, it's a requirement.
George, are you listening in as president of a university?
Yes, I
Any
am.
comments?
the first thing is, I guess, when I was listening to Claus, all of the things that you mentioned in my mind are choices. They could choose to work somewhere else. And I think, as David's mentioned, unless it's stated in their contract with the university, I don't know that we can take things that people perceive they must do or choose to do and put it in the same perspective as a contract. The other thing is, I wish you could say that the president and every faculty member and every staff person is equal, but that's not true. Because if anything happens on the campus, it ultimately will fall back to the president. So I don't know that it would be appropriate for us to look at them or treat them exactly the same, given the level of responsibility and accountability we are putting within that position. And then I think the last thing is really the point that David makes, is that the contract is pretty clear. If it says we're requiring him to live there, maybe he could save money even from this if he wanted to choose to live somewhere else, but I don't think we contractually are giving him that option. So I recognize the optics issue, but if we were looking at, on apples to apples comparison in terms of his level of responsibility, his level of accountability compared to everyone else, it's not the same. So even from an optics standpoint, it's pretty tough. I think now there will be perception issues, and people have their views of all of this because, as Claus said, he's at the top of the food chain. But I'll tell you, the pressure that he has at the top of the food chain is nothing compared to anyone else at the college or at the university.
I'll make a motion that we approve the annual salary recommendation for the president.
I second.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. All right, next up on our agenda is ZX-3, approval of philanthropic naming request.
And Jason, because, well, he's going to take it down, but never mind.
Good morning. We would like to request approval of a philanthropic naming opportunity for the public radio studio in the academic complex as the Spiller Family Studio in recognition of a lead gift from Cora Jane Spiller. Ms. Cora Jane Spiller of Bowling Green, Kentucky, graduated from College High in 1946 and received a bachelor's degree in English in 1950. Her late husband, Colonel Robert E. Spiller, to whom she was married for 66 years, is also a WKU alumnus, earning degrees in 1949, 1950, and 1984. Colonel Spiller was an adjunct professor in military science and also served as the director of the WKU Ag Exposition Center. They have been and continue to be extremely engaged in the life of Western Kentucky University and have been involved in a multitude of activities for many, many years. Ms. Spiller has 36 years of consecutive giving to WKU, and this has been dispersed amongst many areas across campus. She's a lifetime member of the WKU Alumni Association, the Henry Hardin Cherry Society, Society of 1906, and the WKU Sisterhood. This philanthropic naming request is recommended in recognition of Ms. Spiller's lead gift to the WKU Public Radio Studio. Her philanthropy and service to WKU make this a fitting tribute. The WKU Public Media Department will cover the costs of signage for the room.
I can't say enough about the support of the Spiller family over the years. And it's not just the financial support. Oftentimes, when we would have pledge drives, Colonel Spiller would come and not only volunteer for the phone bank, he would pull out his own personal address book. And the phone was at a lull. He would call his friends and tell them what they were going to give to support public radio and television. And that's the kind of effort and relationships that we have in terms of loyalty all across this campus. The Spillers are a tremendous example of sustained loyalty, especially with regard to public media and other specific areas that have been listed here. They are, so we had one particular instance where we had the president of NPR come to campus a couple of years ago, I was able to coax him here, and he said, I want to sit next to the biggest personality in the room when we were driving back from the airport. And I said, are you sure you really want to do that? And he said, yes. And so we put him right with the Spillers, and they had a wonderful time. And that resulted in an additional gift related to public radio. That wasn't the reason we did it, but Jarl, who ultimately began his career in Kentucky, was very pleased to get that opportunity. I know the Spillers were as well. I can't say enough about their continued sustained support. We have worked on this very carefully to make sure that the entire family has been involved in this process. And I think it's a fitting tribute to the Spiller family.
No further discussion. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. All right, now we have a philanthropy update on my name.
Thank you all. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you all today and bring an update on where we are in our activity over the past few months as we gear up for the launch of the public phase of our capital campaign in just a few short months. Overall, we're tracking to about 75% of the goal that we will announce in April. Keep that a surprise until that time, but we're really pleased with the progress that we've made. A few highlights on the slide that we're sharing with you today is first of all the Opportunity Fund. This has just been a tremendous effort and asset to our institution already, and we continue to see that this is resonating a lot with our constituents. As of today, $33,315,555 have been given or pledged to the Opportunity Fund. That's up 5.9% since August 13th. That was the president's convocation when we announced a $27 million had been raised to that point. About 25% of that overall goal has been raised in the last 18 months. So again, tremendous momentum as we move forward and are aggressively pursuing the $50 million goal that was announced at the president's investiture in April of 2018. We also have out there about 5 million in verbal commitments. And when you take a look at that, that's really an uptick in activity and conversations with our donors as we get ready to launch in April, the public phase of the campaign. The activity is picking up, and we're really excited that we have a lot of work in the pipeline that we're working to close as we move towards that public announcement of the campaign. As you move down the list there, one thing I wanted to point out is the declining alumni participation rates, and this is a national trend across the country. Frankly, for us, we've not fallen off as much as some institutions have. But this is a national trend, and it's something that's a big conversation in the industry as to how do we combat declining alumni participation rates. While overall dollars are going up, you're seeing that by fewer and fewer donors that are making those gifts to institutions. And so one of the things that we are implementing is digital engagement officers. Those are going to be launching in the next few weeks for us, and I'm really excited about the opportunity and the breadth of the constituents that we're going to be able to contact through that program. Instead of our officers getting in the car and driving or flying to different locations, they're going to be sitting behind computer screens. They're going to be contacting our alumni and our constituents on their cell phones. And so it's going to be a neat test and an opportunity for us to really transition to the next generation and think about how do our younger alumni engage a cell phone digitally. And so we're really excited to launch that program and are optimistic that's going to help buck that trend of declining participation.
You know the factors behind the decline?
Recession, number one, we've never recovered from the recession. Middle class, declining, incomes. And so just more also opportunities to give. More and more nonprofits every year are created. And so there's a lot of competition.
There was a program about a year ago, I think I attended, maybe a Saturday morning, maybe others were here, but they were some national people that came in to talk about fundraising, and they gave some insight into that, but they were very upbeat because even though that number's going down, the generation that will be giving in the next 10, 15 years, the baby boomers are in command of a lot of money, and they are perhaps more philanthropically inclined than, say, the millennials. And I think they did use millennials. Right now, they take a different viewpoint.
One of the other issues, particularly for young graduates, is student debt growth. So if you think about the pressure on young people as they leave, they have wages have been pretty flat. The percentage of students leaving with debt is larger, and so that obligation, which is pressuring acquisition and beginning families, is also pressuring philanthropy. The thing that's important about the trend is that even with a growing gift size, a declining number of individuals engaged long-term is a trend we have to stem. Because, and for this reason, because today's annual fund givers, folks who make very small, regular gifts, $100, $50, $10, those are the future donors who will make $25, $50, $100,000 gifts. And the way you begin that relationship and that pattern of giving is really with that annual fund. So this is a move that we're making as an institution that is, it's innovative, and it's essentially saying we can't continue to do annual solicitations the way we've always done them. We have to think differently about the way in which this generation both will be identified and cultivated and engaged, and electronically fundraising is typically a conservative business, meaning that we don't adopt innovations, much like higher education, very quickly. But it's time.
Amanda, I would wonder what comments you'd have. We know since 1990, the income inequality business has gotten bigger and bigger, wider and wider. And since 1990, I read, other than the top 1 or 2% earners, incomes have remained flat. So while the top 1 or 2% has gone up exponentially, so I would think you would want to target a lot of your efforts to that 1 or 2%. Is there any
And we do.
discussion?
With our major gift program, that's, where we have the one-on-one solicitation happening in your office, in your home, the more personal contact. Really, this digital engagement opportunity is to take it now down into the next 10, 20, 30% of our base. That same experience, that one-on-one, how do you like to engage with the institution? What are the ways that we can connect you to the institution, and taking a very holistic viewpoint to a broader audience. And so we're absolutely targeting, the best out there that we can. And, that's where you're also seeing a lot more mega gifts that are being given to institutions. Again, but by fewer people that are investing.
If I could also comment on that for the folks who do have that accumulated wealth. It is a rare donor who shows up and their first gift is a major gift. It's just not the way folks decide to engage. And so as much as we have to focus on that 1, 5, 10% who have resources, the reality is you never know who that person might be from the time they graduate to the time where they hit that earning potential. And so what we have to do as an institution is make sure every alumnus is engaged as fully as possible so that we've covered all of our bases. You didn't know Bill Gates was going to be Bill Gates when he was a freshman at Harvard, but they hadn't paid attention to him.
Do you have lower level entry points or monthly auto draft giving for people? I think for millennials, I think a lot of people will say, well, I'm already giving WKU my money because I pay my student loan debt. Is that age gap there? And asking somebody for a first time gift of $250, which is a small gift to the university, is big for a first time donor, especially when they're young. That might be a major gift. So starting at those, would you do $5 a month and be just connected to us is the way to engage young people. And they give to causes that they feel passionate about and tied to. So you see GoFundMe accounts on Facebook to come and help this family, to do these special things, to help pay this for dogs' vet bills. That's where they're giving, not necessarily a long-term relationship with their university?
We have engaged in crowdfunding platforms, fly fishing trips, projects that are passion projects for departments and programs across campus. We're going to continue to do that, particularly when we move to the Day of Giving in April. You're going to see a big focus on that, where micro projects, challenges, opportunities, kind of a gamification type atmosphere to encourage people to participate and challenge their friends. So yes, we've done that, and we're going to continue to increase our engagement in those type of activities.
Having been on the Alumni Association for 6 years and being the president of that association, I don't feel like the Alumni Association probably supports the efforts of philanthropy as well as it could. And I think there probably needs to be a real good look at that particular organization and what we can improve on, and not continue to do the same things over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. As we did it that way 15 years ago or 20 years ago, there's no way changing it.
We're working on that.
And I will tell you that I don't really feel like I wasted my time, but there was lots of times I get in the car. Like, I look forward to seeing you guys. I just have to tell y'all, I come up here, I'm all excited, buy something new to wear, get all my pins on and everything else. And I will tell you that at some point in time, it was a chore to come up here. And you got a lot of good alumni that were in the association that now no longer feel engaged. And because there's not been an effort of the Alumni Association to re-engage those people very well. And that is probably a base that you could grab hold of. It. We've done a very poor job of doing that.
I think something I've said frequently since I've been here is meaningful alumni engagement, and that's about you and how you want to engage with the institution. And so we have to provide a variety of opportunities for people to engage the way that they want to engage. And so that we're absolutely talking about that. We actually had a panel of the philanthropy team that came over to the Alumni Association Board of Directors this weekend and talked about the campaign and how the association can engage in the campaign. And so we've made a lot of progress to again, it's philanthropy and alumni engagement. It's not just philanthropy, it's not just on alumni engagement. And so how can we build those bridges and take a holistic approach to that entire engagement with the institution?
But several times when we were on the board, we would have campaigns and contests. Who could get the most members signed up? And I just will tell you that I just did one. I won 1 year, actually 2 years I won, to get the most members to join. But if you looked at the group, there were only a few of us that were doing that. And when you only have 3 or 4 people in a group of 30, then that's disappointing as well. So you have to have everyone engaged in that group. And I got a really neat cup, or a service cup type thing to give it as an award. It was actually quite neat. But part of that was because I wanted people engaged and I wanted people to feel about this university like I do. And I know that sometimes enthusiasm is contagious, but there wasn't really that much of that going on in that association. So if we could improve that, that would be great.
Beyond philanthropy, one of the things that we've really pressed upon, given the challenges around recruitment, enrollment, and graduation that we're addressing head on, how can alumni help facilitate recruitment of students? How can they help facilitate job placement after graduation? So, there are many ways that I think folks can give. They can give a little bit of their personal resources, but more importantly, they can give of their time. And we have to make sure that we're creating opportunities for that deep engagement, not just surface things. And I love homecoming. I think it's a wonderful celebration. And it's an important part of who we are as an institution. But the reality is that for people to be engaged and excited, they have to do something that has meaning for them. Develop meaningful relationships, meaningful work, those two things. And it can be volunteer work too.
Can you elaborate a little bit what digital methods you think you can use to engage people?
Zoom, cell phone, FaceTime.
What do you mean you say cell phone?
Texting.
What do you mean?
FaceTiming somebody or texting with our constituents. Of course, if they give us permission. But Skype, Zoom, any of those sort of video conferencing type activities, like George today, setting up a meeting with someone digitally instead of always having to travel or be there and book out a schedule and being able to really ramp up our efforts to contact more people.
And you think people are going to give you the time to do that?
I think so.
it's interesting. The old model used to be, and this is what I grew up in as a young alumni officer and then development officer 30 years ago, is you would have an alumni event in a city. You'd fill out anchor appointments and then other visits you did all day. The reality is it's almost impossible to get those visits now because people don't want to talk to you in person. It's a really tough thing, particularly those first visits. But this generation, millennials, Generation Z, are actually more comfortable with saying, look, don't come to my office and drop off a folder, but I'll Skype with you or we can have an exchange that way. And the other thing I think this will allow us to do is leverage information in a way that we've not leveraged it before. So if you think about how it is you do prospecting and identify individuals who may have capacity, doing it electronically and using some of the tools available to us through LinkedIn and other things that we have not been leveraging, we think we're going to get some more results that way too.
What I'm worried about is, like, if I look at students or my kids, if whatever this thing vibrates, and they look at it and they don't know who that is, okay,
Correct.
it's ignored, okay, and so that's what I'm wondering, how you're going to cross that barrier.
We're already dealing with that.
Okay.
When we call and they ignore your emails. So, we're hoping taking a different approach to it, that people are going to be more willing to spend 15 minutes from the comforts of their home or their office and talk with us. We're also targeting at the beginning, mostly it's going to be people who have already given to us, people who are lapsed. And so they have participated. It's on reactivation. Those folks is where we'll start. It's working. Other institutions have done this. It's still very early. We were the third to take with Evertree, the company that we're working with on this platform. We were the third university to sign on with them for this. And so other institutions have done it in-house that have a lot more resources, a lot more staff. We're excited about doing something different and taking a chance on something that I think could have big returns for us in the long run.
How many, reiterate what Dr. Caboni said about travel. I travel a lot, but I am on a plane regularly. It's getting more expensive. I mean, we're not talking about just a flight. We're talking about hotel rooms. We're talking about the rental cars. By the time you start adding that up, and if you're going to get business or trying to get a gift, what you may get out of the expense of the plane ticket, the overnight stay, the rental car may not be as effective as trying to do it via telephone or Skype. Because it is just getting more and more expensive to travel. Rental cars are outrageous, and I've been shocked in the last little bit, even what's jumped from a year, how expensive it is to travel anymore.
I commend your work here. I think that you've done a great job and excited for the announcement and all those things. How many digital engagement officers have you hired?
We're going to have 3, and it's actually staff that we already have that we're transitioning to those roles. When I got here, I felt like those 3 individuals didn't have a whole lot of direction. They were just hopping in the car and maybe driving up to Louisville, spending a day seeing folks, which is great, but there wasn't a whole lot of strategy to what they were doing. And so this presented an opportunity for us to transition them into those roles. Actually gave them an option, sat down with them and said, this is something new we want to try. Let them sit in on the presentation. They're all very excited and can't wait to get started. So
If they develop a relationship digitally with somebody, will they keep that relationship and then go visit, or does that then pass off to someone else?
it will be digital until that person rises to the level of a major gift opportunity. Then the in-person visit will start taking place. But a lot of it's going to be almost like the phone-a-thon too. It's kind of the next level of the phone-a-thon system where it's very targeted. It's almost a reminder of, you made a nice gift, you made $1,500 gift to us last year. Don't forget about us. What other ways can I help you engage with the institution? And I think, again, shifting to engagement rather than just that transactional asking for money is important as we look at the next generation of engagement with our institution.
Amanda, the other statistic I remember from that presentation was that we do operate a pretty lean organization.
Very lean.
Since you're new to it, feel like you're getting what you need at this point.
Never, but we're doing, coming up with ways like this that I think we can maximize our investment is challenging. We've cut phone-a-thon, we've cut mail, we've cut staff, as everybody has. But it takes money to raise money. And so it's tough. We've spent the last year really fine tooth comb through the budget, really making sure that we're putting our investment into the right places. And so I think we're maximizing every dollar that we have in our budget.
Hey, Phil, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to make a couple of comments. First of all, I endorse and support everything that Amanda and Dr. Caponi have said. We actually at the college offer a chartered advisor in philanthropy. So we work with folks that are in the philanthropy space across the country, and everything that they have showed is the challenges that we see and hear from folks in this space that are trying to raise money. Some additional things that I would add to the comments they've made. One is about this next generation. We're anticipating some 60 trillion, that's with a T, wealth transfer over the next 20 to 25 years. That is money that's going to be transferred to women and money that's going to be transferred to a next generation of folks that have a different perspective than most of us sitting in the room and involved in this process. And where we're saying that the next gen has a different philosophy, their investment approach and where they want to give has really been more on social justice and equality and things, climate change, things of that nature. And so colleges and universities and others are going to have to rethink what we're asking for, how we're going to apply and use dollars, how we can tell our story that somehow or another can relate to this new generation of thinking around where we give our money. The other thing that we're seeing, which is very interesting, is that people are being asked by so many sources for contributions that there's this huge growth in donor advised funds. That is, you just put your money into a pot, and then there's Fidelity has a large one, has actually one of the largest in the country. Vanguard has one, but people give their money, they get the tax write-off immediately. They've got a structure where they can tell them, here's what I'm interested in. And then that donor advised funds will go out and do all the work for them. And then that actually may take away that personal relationship we have with them as it relates to them being alumni. The other thing that we've seen is that everybody is trying to keep money locally. And so if I'm in Philadelphia and I'm an alumni of Western Kentucky University and I'm building relationships and networking in Philadelphia, they're really pressing me to be more engaged in the community there so that they can define their community as a charitable place to live. And so these are all additional pressures on top of what has already been shared that we're going to be facing. And yet, when I look at these numbers, it's pretty impressive what we've been able to accomplish up to this point. And even so with the declining participation, I think it's a very, very positive story, but it is tough. And Amanda said the most important thing that sometimes I think people forget, it takes money to raise money. And if you don't have the infrastructure and support, if you don't have this digital approach to how you're going to go after the next generation, then you're just going to get farther and farther behind because eventually all of us who still want to give money the old way and still like to get our mail and all those other things, we're going to fade away. And if the university, it's challenged because she has pressure today to raise money, but is even more to put the infrastructure in place to ensure we're raising money in the future.
I agree. Just very quickly, I agree 100% with what George has said. When we look at a very loyal audience, for example, public media is known for a very loyal audience. And 5 years ago, we began targeting differently because we specifically saw a reduction in transactional giving. Now, we have switched from under 30% sustaining members. So what we call a sustaining member is a monthly giver that may give at a specific amount. That now is up to over 60% of our base. So we have approximately 900 monthly contributions that come in specifically related to our cause. So we very much agree with this approach and have seen it work with a very loyal base. Now, the reason that's been effective for us is we have that one-to-many communication platform. We can go on the radio or go on television every day or go on our digital platforms and communicate directly. So I applaud this effort. I think it echoes a national trend, one that had happened just a few years ago in public media. Now, the reason that matters is it has happened with an older audience. So I think it will matriculate through all age groups, and I think the university will benefit ultimately.
Two quick reminders before I leave. Campaign kickoff, April 17th, Friday evening. Be a lot of fun, very inclusive. I think it's going to be a very different event than we've been having here at the institution in the past when we kick off a campaign or have a president's gala. So we're really excited about that. Hope that you all will be there. Very involved with student-centered celebration, again, opportunity fund, and a lot of the work that we're doing there. And then our first ever dedicated day of giving will follow on that Tuesday, April 21st. So again, a lot of the things that we're talking about and ways that we can engage this audience. Well, that's how we can take the campaign kickoff to a broader audience, to the 50, the 25, the $5 on those days. So a lot of work to do in the next few months, but we're really excited and think that we've made a lot of progress to this point. And we'll be excited to
All right, next up is on our information items, the legislative update.
Morning.
Good morning. Ms. Jennifer.
Okay, well, legislative session is underway. So it's not been too crazy up there just yet. It's still pretty quiet. And I think that's all about to change now that the governor has introduced his budget. Wanted to just give you a quick update. I'm sure you all are all aware of this, but the budget recommendation for post-secondary education, what CPE submitted to the governor was to increase the performance funding pool in the first year up an additional 6.2%, which was about $52 million. And the second year, an additional 2.6%, which would be a total of 8.8 over the biennium. And that total would be about $75 million. In the governor's budget, he zeroed out performance funding. So instead, he gave all the universities a 1% increase in our base appropriation. But he did take out all funding for performance funding. I doubt that stays that way, seeing as we have a statute that requires performance funding, and I think that the House and the Senate are very invested in performance funding. The President and I had several meetings on Wednesday with some key legislators, and so I fully expect to see performance funding be put back into the House budget here in the next month or so. The other thing that we asked for in the budget request was for asset preservation. This is to take care of some, and Brian could probably talk a little bit more to this, but to take care of infrastructure needs. These are not exciting things. This is like our underground steam line, correct?
Yep.
And go ahead.
Yeah, we've had I think the Commonwealth of Kentucky, the last report that I saw, as a university with 6 million square feet, we've got about $530 million worth of deferred maintenance per the state has identified. Does that mean we're not operational? No, we're very operational, and that's what we try to maintain. So it is a real, it's promising.
So the 400 million that higher education requested, that's not just 400 million for WKU. That was a matching pool. So it would be for every dollar the state, or for every $2 the state put in, we put in $1. The governor did include money. He calls it his resurgence fund instead of asset preservation, but he put it in at 200 million, so half of what was requested. Hopefully that will stay in as well. And we certainly, we met with the speaker, we met with the House Chairman of Appropriations and Revenue on Wednesday, and explained how important that is, our needs, and we've been you won't really see where we spend all that money. But, because like I said, it's project, it's not buildings, it's things to, keep the campus, moving forward. So, this is obviously the very first step in a very long budget process. I don't expect to see anything come out of the House until March. The president will testify on February 13th in front of the Budget Review Subcommittee on Post-Secondary Education. All of the universities, they split us up over 3 weeks, give us an opportunity to explain, what we need as far as the budget goes. So he will do that on the 13th. Beyond that, I'm gonna force him to come spend a lot of time with me in Frankfurt, meeting with lots of legislators and sharing our story and talking about the great things we have going on campus, but also our needs. And the message we did receive on Wednesday was, we know higher ed can't take much more. So I'm hoping that will follow through.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I'll just add the message that we're sharing, not just from WKU, but across all of our institutions, is that what has happened for the past decade cannot happen, and that the best way for us to continue to grow as a state and economy is an investment in higher education. That's a legislative-oriented message. For us to do what we need to do, we need the state to be good partners, and that means they have to do their share. $500 million here in deferred maintenance on state assets. One of the things, and I know this will come up later, is taking care of our infrastructure is a desperate need on this campus. We are being as proactive as possible, but the reality is we also are at a place where we're reacting to unplanned immediate needs from infrastructure. And so $500 million here, it's $7 billion across the higher education system. And so people don't want to study, obviously, in crumbling infrastructure. I think it's a real opportunity for us. Performance funding, I've always articulated it this way. We'll continue during the session to talk about. I think it is appropriate for the taxpayers of the state, for the legislature, to ask for us to be held accountable for what it is they're investing in. And so I do think, given the conversations I've heard, that the way in which that funding growth is allocated is likely to change and probably move back toward performance funding. The last thing that the governor put in his budget, it started as another conversation. You will recall last year, there was a great deal of work on pension around KERS. The governor has shifted some resources around. They've worked to think about the level of contribution required from universities and quasis to that pension fund. And as much as I did not want to talk about pension, I wanted to talk about graduation and recruitment and affordability for students. Pension is likely to be part of the conversation again this year. And we will talk about that as you as Regents, we as a campus, as we think about KERS, the contribution that would be required for us to meet our obligation to that system if there were some soft exit, and what that looks like over the long term and how doable is it. You may have seen an article in the Courier Journal just a couple of days ago where the interim president from Eastern Kentucky said, we're stuck between a hard place. We can't afford to exit. We can't afford to stay in. What are we supposed to do? And I think we, as a university, as challenging as it may appear, and it is challenging, obviously, financially, where higher education is, we're in a much better position, both because of scale and the proactive work we've done than our sister institutions. So know that will be coming up as well. I'm positive about the session. The tone in Frankfurt compared to my first 2 years in Frankfurt has been a breath of fresh air. I do think there is a spirit of collaboration and cooperation that did not exist, and the tone is just different. I'm not certain that changes any of the outcomes, but it's a more pleasant place to be, at least so far.
The CPE's position on the performance funding similar to yours?
So the presidents all agreed that we were asking for that 6.2, then up to 8% to go through performance funding. And so we've all signed on to that. That will continue to be the request. I'm appreciative of the work that the governor has done. And, you know, part of this has to do with a conversation around what's the effect of the performance funding model on institutions. And it has the effect of shifting from one institution to another dollars. And part of that is appropriate, given the number of students based upon appropriation funding that some universities have versus what we might have as a larger place that has grown over time. There will be, by statute, a performance funding work group that I'll be on that begins sometime in the spring, summer, to re-examine performance funding. What are the effects of performance funding and what are potentially the unintended consequences of the model that was assembled? One of the critiques that I made last year during testimony around performance funding was that it is built as a 100% growth model. You're rewarded for only getting bigger, having more. There's no efficiency measures included. That makes little sense in the environment where we have a declining age cohort going to college. And so that's one issue. The second issue is, if you recall last year, there was a reduction in funding that went through the performance model. Performance funding only works when it is an incentive, meaning there's additional money for which you're competing, not trying to avoid a reduction. It doesn't work. And so there'll be lots of conversations in the next few months. It's a good start, but 3 long months to go between here and there.
Any further discussion?
You mentioned the retirement system. In the Courier Journal, it said that the governor proposed that he wants to lower these rates, freeze them, but that you still anticipate that we will face the question whether we're going to get out of the system or not.
We will, and reduce the rates for 2 years. So this is not, it's not in perpetuity. There's no permanent freeze, and the number that was floated, it's 67%, but
So
we got some more information about that just
It's supposed
yesterday.
to go up to 93 is what KERS has requested. Governor at 67. Then, and it's kind of hard to see this in there, but apparently, from what budget staff has told us yesterday, is that the governor then gave the comprehensive universities some additional funding to cover the difference between 49 that we're paying now and that 67, so that we would stay at 49%. But you know, the message we received on Wednesday was, okay, but we're already making this worse by the universities being held at 49%, and we understand that. But so they're saying, so now for 2 more years, we're going to do that again, and it's just going to keep kind of digging that hole. So just not sure what they're going to do about that.
So as you think about what the size or the magnitude of our obligation might be in that one system, depending upon the choice we would take, it could be as much as $150 million. That would absorb not just all of our bonding capacity today, it would absorb all of our bonding capacity for almost ever. We'd never be able to do another project that required bonding. So I think that's probably unlikely to be an option. There is an escalator, a 1.5% escalator that would be put in place every year. It would be our contribution annually to whatever that obligation is. I argue, at least you know it's 1.5% every year, but I don't know what that starting number is yet. And if that starting number is higher than we could manage as an institution, is that even an option? So we'll have these, remember, if you remember the timeline, we'll begin these conversations this semester. We have to notify and the Regents will have to vote between April 1st and May 1st to make some sort of decision. And so we are statutorily only now beginning to get the information from the pension folks. So it will be a conversation.
Isn't it due today?
This is the earliest they can give it to you.
Oh.
like making $150 million decision under highly constrained time.
Anything further? Thank you. All right, that concludes our agenda for the executive committee. Now, on to the finance and budget committee. First item on our agenda is FB1, approval of the 2019-2020 operating budget revisions.
So this is a standard exercise that we go through each year once the carry forward is approved or finalized during the closing process. And so I'm waiting for the slides to come up. As I'm waiting for that though, let me point out on your action item, there was one minor typo. And I talked with Julia, it was very minor. It says total carry forward generated fiscal year 2019. It said 2018, it should be 2019. So Julia is going to correct that before it goes to the full board, but I wanted to bring it to your attention. And so it looks like we're having a few problems with the slides. So let me go ahead and work through this. So the total carry.
You do have the slides. We have a copy of the slides.
Oh, okay, good, good. So the total carry forward generated for fiscal year 2019 was approximately 30.6 million. And there we go. And what we're seeking approval today of this 30.6 million are budget revisions. The first one, which is an increase to existing operating reserves. That's the auxiliaries such as parking and bookstore. When they generate a surplus, we transfer that into their capital reserve so they can perform renovations throughout the year. And then the other expenditure allocations include academic affairs, about 8.7 million. That would be maintained and controlled by the university provost, and she would make the decision on how that is allocated out to the academic units and what she chooses to do with that. The other items, it's interesting that we were just talking about infrastructure. We're recommending that we put $1 million into an infrastructure repair fund. And what, again, we mean by infrastructure are basically the steam and chill underground systems and basically just our plant on campus, maintaining that. Also then recommending that 750,000 go into an IT fund. Again, that's basically IT infrastructure, your computers, your servers, software, hardware, all of those items. Administrative infrastructure, that's 300,000. Again, that would be controlled by myself and making decisions with the provost and the president as to how we allocate that. Basically, I'm doing some review of my organizations. So that's going to cost some money, and that's just a pool of money for me to allocate out. Our budget model and our associated budget software, that's going to, we've allocated about $1 million for that, for consulting contracts, and again, the budgeting software. And then 295,000 for the capital campaign kickoff. So in total, those are around 14.6 million, and of the 30 million in carryover. And I think initially, if I remember right, when Ann presented the budget back in June to the Regents, she was estimating carry forward to be about 25 million. So actually we ended up with a higher carry forward than what she was estimating at that time.
Thank you. Any questions?
Susan, can you clarify when we talk about infrastructure repair fund, is that the same, what Jennifer and Brian brought up, is that infrastructure, is that the same thing? So you're hoping money from the state, but you're also wanting to set aside $1 million in the budget. Is that, what would that be for? What does infrastructure actually mean?
just maintaining our facilities on campus, our HVAC systems, our roofs, our roads, all of those items. And I'm
I'm gonna give you a very specific example for this. Last year, and Brian can add color, but we had an issue with the HVAC and piping system in the Fine Arts Center to the tune of, how much do we invest in that?
Well, about $300,000.
Because it was leaking water into faculty offices, performance spaces. If we didn't have that money set aside to address that issue, we would have not been able to react either as quickly or deal with the issue. You gotta remember, we're not even talking about a 1% contingency. This is I don't even know, somebody else could do the math, but so $500 million, $1 million is really like, you know, a drop in the ocean. But we gotta have something there.
So this is your quick fix. Right, I mean, when you can't get the other funding in other ways, this is your quick fix.
And the hope is that if the asset preservation pool were available, we might be able to take $1 million and turn it into $3 million with state investment.
Because typically what CPE will do, what they've done in the past with these type of funds, if it does actually get approved, is they would allow you, if we started projects in July, they would let you count that towards the match. So I think it's really important that we set this aside for those projects.
And the CPE ask is only about 10% of the assessed need for the entire state. So even if the entire CPE ask is funded, we're still way behind.
If the full CPE ask were available, it would be $37 million from the state, matched with about $17 million from us. So $54 million. That would be that would be a huge 10% way to address that $500 million hole. But so then it goes from $500 million down to $450 million in asset repair required.
If memory serves me correctly, I think local school boards are required to have 2 or 3% of a contingency fund for this sort of thing. So I'd say this is.
It's a big problem in higher education in the state. Very large.
And what about what's in the administrative infrastructure?
As I was saying, so those would be things like studies that I'm performing to try and bring in some folks from the outside to look at some of the administrative units to see that we're operating as efficiently as we can, and looking at the organizations and how they may be restructured slightly. I can also, I was talking with Klaus and David yesterday on these subjects, and we spent a good bit of time. I don't know that 300,000 is the right number for those studies. Maybe it's 100,000. And then what I would do is shift that 200,000 into the plant infrastructure. Because the more we can put into that bucket, the better we will be. And the same with the IT infrastructure. If working with Greg, if 750 is not the right number and it turns out to be 250, we would take the 500,000 and again shift it into the plant infrastructure. Because the more we can get into that pot, the better.
Can you elaborate a little bit, or Greg, what you have planned for the IT infrastructure?
It's to address our lengthy replacement cycles primarily. We've got probably close to a 20-year replacement cycle on some of our core equipment in the network, and that would be a hell of a boost, to kind of raise that up to a more sustainable level. Plus, we've got probably a 10 to 15-year replacement cycle on a lot of our wireless infrastructure as well. And there's many other needs up and down the stack. We've got servers, we've got storage, we've got data center equipment. It's many things, honestly.
Thank you.
Sure.
So just for me again, can you elaborate how the determination was made for these specific allocations? So we had a $30 million pot. 13 of that was in the existing fiscal year budget already, correct? That's my understanding. We're taking, based on existing policy, 2.591 roughly goes into another pot, and the remainder of that now the 14.597 is an allocation in the current, a reallocation in the current fiscal year. So this has to be spent or allocated or put aside before the end of the current fiscal year, or it becomes carry forward as well. Correct? But how was the determination made? What amounts went where?
Okay, well, the increase to the existing operating reserves, that's in policy. That,
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. I had already
okay,
specified that that was by policy.
again, those are just the auxiliary functions of the university, just maintaining their surplus to do renovations to their facilities and such. And we always bring those revisions back to the board as well during the year. The other ones, David, they were made, the academic affairs. Once we paid the bills, and what I mean by paying the bills, looking at how much the ramp implementation is going to cost, how much we needed for the capital campaign kickoff, how much we were estimating on the other infrastructure, the academic affairs carried over the surplus that they generated. Okay, so as far as an estimate of what we needed in the I basically, in working with the provost, we looked at what we had done in prior years. And in prior years, if my memory serves me, I think that there was usually somewhere between 500 and 750,000 towards plant infrastructure. And I increased that slightly, again, working with the provost, because I knew that we were going to have this matching program with the state. IT typically in past years received somewhere between 250 and 500. I increased that slightly because of the infrastructure needs we have in IT. The administrative infrastructure, that was basically just a recognition of the fact that the administrative side of the university was not receiving any type of carry forward. So that was basically just earmarked for needs across the administrative units.
So I understand that, and I have no grievance at all with the idea that we have allocated carry forward. But this is a process that will go away as the ramp model is fully implemented. Is that correct?
I think what you'll see is carry forwards will, because part of the ramp model is that the budgets, as you move through it, will start adjusting themselves so that carry forward will become a thing of the past. Okay, and really the budgets will become more realistic. So there will not be the carry forward. Now, there probably is going to always the units as they become more successful. We're hoping that they will generate more money than their revenue budget, that they will start exceeding their revenue budget. That's the hope of the incentive-based model. What we have to do, we have to develop a new carry forward policy that runs in tandem with a RCM model. And we're in the process of doing that with Huron.
And the reason that I want to keep beating on this, but it seems to me that there's an awful lot of discretionary spending that's allowed through this process. And when we have, and I'm going to say it this way, we have $30 million, but yet we have a budget deficit. It doesn't look like that just doesn't look like we're operating in an ideal fashion. And then you talk about discretion over 300, when in reality, you have discretion over 2 million that you can dole however you wish. And when we talk about considerations for other departments, you're giving consideration to units that you oversee, but not units that you don't necessarily outside of academics. Because there are other units on this campus that aren't given any consideration in this fund. Now, I mentioned this yesterday, and I hate to bring it up again today in this session, but when we talk about, there are other avenues for other groups on this campus to request money. And at what point do they get equal consideration in this process? And I realize that this is married to the past, and it's unfortunately something you inherited. And that's why I'm saying, I'm going to support this maybe, but I cannot see how we can continue as a university with this gross amount of carry forward and make the argument that we need to get rid of people at the same time.
So I'll address this one directly. I think you're absolutely right. This is an artifact from a carry forward policy that used to exist. I would argue that carry forward is an incredibly inefficient way to allocate resources. It doesn't make sense long term. But we have to, again, have a glide path down. We could make a strategic choice as an institution to cover the $8.9 million gap in our budget with the $8.6 million we have there for academic affairs, or the other half of it. But that choice to bring our expenditure down to not use carry forward to fill the hole would have real implications, right? It would mean there are things that we need that we can't do. It would inflict immediate pain and choices there. And I would argue that this is a pretty conservative infrastructure investment fund. When you think about $1 million out of a $500 million need, that's minuscule. I think the other part to remember about this, as we move toward full implementation of the ramp model, there are pieces that still have to get done, right? And now that Susan's here, the more fulsome implementation will be on July 1. We have to think, this is part of the exercise of thinking differently about our budgets, right? We used to think, well, I'm not going to spend it, so I get it back next year. What we have to think about is, how do I generate more revenue so there's more revenue for me to spend next year? And the distinction between allocations for academic affairs and the others. If we don't upgrade our IT, that's $750,000. That has a direct effect on our academic operations. If we don't have $1 million to fix a leaky classroom, that has a direct effect on our academic operations. And so I know it looks like there's a lot of money there, but in a $500 million budget, $350 million budget, that's about 1.5%.
So I want to stress that my comments do not reflect my disdain for any of the amounts.
Yeah.
It's more of the way that they've been determined. I completely agree that infrastructure repair, I've had these conversations with Brian, and it's tremendously underfunded. That is absolutely not an argument. I think we have to go on trust related to IT, the administrative infrastructure. There needs to be some leniency. I'm talking about the method of allocation. That is my concern. And my understanding yesterday was the capital campaign kickoff. That is the only budget line for that it is not a supplement to that. And to me, that probably should have been considered initially in the budget. It's just okay. I mean, I'm perfectly fine with that as well. I think it should be at least that amount. But this is about discretionary money. And there is a flag out there when you have $2 million discretion, regardless of the purpose of the initial allocation. And I'm just saying, we are taking steps to move away from that. Let's continue to take those steps.
I do believe that the Executive Budget Council, along with the process that we have in place, we've never had a more transparent process for looking at numbers, making strategic decisions, and making those recommendations. This is no longer three people sitting around a table making choices. This is a conversation that involves governance, and involves faculty, involves staff. And I would argue that as we move toward it, some of these decisions are going to be influenced by that group. You can't get there all at once. And so point well taken. We can do better, or continue to do better each year, I think. At the same time, there also is a responsibility that I have, and that the Executive Vice President has, to make choices sometimes that, if I were making a self-serving choice, I might not make. So for example, the $1 million in infrastructure. One of the problems that we have as a university is that we didn't put $5 million every year in perpetuity into an infrastructure reinvestment fund. Why? Because you won't see it today. We'll shift it over here. We'll not make a difficult staffing decision. And what happens is, over time, that deferred maintenance builds up to a place where it becomes where we are today. And so I agree that we need to have a broad process, but there are also times, I think, when the immediate need versus the long-term need is a tough call to make. And that's why there is some discretion there, so that we don't do just what is popular, but what's necessary.
Were the ramp budget committees involved in this decision process?
No.
No. In the future, do you anticipate
Yes.
that they will be?
As we talked yesterday, Klaus, what we have to do, again, we were in a compressed timeline this year. What I'm going to do, I've been working with Becca, is we're going to start going ahead and setting up either bi-monthly or monthly meetings with the executive budget committee year-round. So that, because there's timing issues, and if they're not meeting year-round, and you have to make these decisions pretty quickly, in order to have that input from the executive budget committee, I've got to set the meetings up now. So going forward, it will be a year-round process.
Very good. Very good.
Okay, any further discussion?
Can I say one thing? I think lots of time the perception, I think, of Board of Regents is we don't ask questions that we don't ask in the meetings and we don't do our homework. But I think Susan, because she met with Klaus and David and answered some questions for me this morning, that these Board of Regents that you see up here do their homework and check into things and have questions and try to find the answers so that we're well prepared when we come to these meetings.
If I could add to that, there's a notion of rubber stamping that I've heard discussed. I will guarantee you, Klaus and David, the 2 hours that they spent yesterday with
I was
Susan
trying to convince Susan.
aren't rubber stamping anything. Julie, you and I had a conversation before to get answers to your questions. And so
Yes, sir.
for those individuals out there who are critique the Regents for not being engaged or not going through materials with a fine tooth comb, Susan can guarantee them
That that's
these
not
are,
happening.
the materials are not just read, they're digested, they're critiqued, and questions are answered.
Yeah, I'll echo this, and it may sound that I'm being tremendously critical. I'm echoing the voices in my own ears from prior weeks or from the time that this material is given to me. And also, we do a tremendous amount of work. The number of hours that we put in prior to the meeting with Susan on getting some flow of how I want to ask the question. I don't want to waste her time. And she gave a tremendous amount of time yesterday to Klaus and I. And I'm convinced never was able to eat lunch because of that, because I know she was going into a meeting right after hours that went over. So it may sound like I'm being critical, but in reality, there are things that I need to make sure are part of the record based on what we discussed yesterday to give additional clarity where we thought that there may be some confusion. Now, and specifically today, mine were around EX2 and FB1. And that's one of the reasons we spent a lot of time on these in discussion. And it still has a tendency to color my vote as a member of this committee. And I appreciate that time. I think this effort for transparency is far above and beyond. And believe me, I can tell you, we are not a rubber stamp.
May I add to that? I'm reminded of Regent Nichols' article that he shared with me and several other board members about constructive friction and the relationship between a board and a university. The university also, this is not a defensive posture. What we want to do is have a give and a take and a questioning and a pushback that allows us to get to the best possible decision making. That's true with the Regents, that's true with faculty senate, that's true with staff senate as well, and also with our student government. This is a healthy conversation, not a negative thing, and it occurs both here in public forums, but individually for our individual relationships as well.
Can I add something in addition to that? This has been the right type of conversation that we should be having. There's something that I hope that we as Regents keep in perspective, and we share that with our constituents. And that is that probably the most difficult thing in life within an organization is change management. And this is what we're going through. Think about what has been inherited that you have to bring forward. And then you think about where we're going. And there are a lot of emotions in that. There are a lot of perspectives in that. And that's the process of change management. And some people manage it well and some people don't manage it well. And that's okay. That's to be understood. But as a governing board, our responsibility is to understand the challenges that is on the administration to lead and run the college, the university, okay? And what oversight, strategic oversight that we should give that doesn't really get into, it's totally just my constituency, because you have two responsibilities. You may have your constituency, but you have a fiduciary responsibility for the university. And when I think about where we started, when Dr. Caboni came in and we said we're going to go to the ramp system, I mean, we've made tremendous progress already. And I think all of you are saying that based on the transparency that is there. The objective is, how do we keep getting better at that? The other thing is, it's really nice to hear that we're sitting here having a conversation that at some point in time, we want this to go away, but we also want to understand that the future university that we have, that we're responsible for, is going to have to be able to create more revenue that helps it becomes always self-sustainable, given all the other noises out there and issues that we have to face with, given the government oversight. So this is very, very healthy. It's very positive. It's the right kind of conversations, the right discussions, the right questions, but it is a part of this huge change management. And we have to tell our constituents, we have to understand it ourselves, because it is not going, we're not going to get there overnight. But really, please stop and evaluate the progress. The 3 years that I've been involved, unbelievable what I see now compared to what I saw in the beginning. And it really makes me feel good that we are moving in the right direction to give the right oversight that's appropriate and necessary.
As usual, George puts things in proper perspective, and I certainly agree with what he said, having been in the middle of things the last 2.5 years. And there are more things to come and more battles to fight as we bring positive change. And this is all part of it. Okay, any further discussion? Not, I'll entertain a motion to approve FB1.
So moved.
Do I have a second? I'm not on. Sheldon just went. It took a break, so we might.
Just took a break, so we might have to wait.
We'll wait for Sheldon to get it.
While we're waiting, I just want to comment. I really appreciate Susan taking the time to answer the questions, and this has happened before. I'm really grateful that I do get the information I'm asking.
I'm thankful I don't have to provide it. No, the level, so, and this is, I mean, this is important for folks to see.
If you think about the significance of basically a 24-hour turnaround for a 2-hour block, and how difficult that is with anybody on this campus, I really appreciate that. I really do.
And the level of granularity with which she can answer those questions that we're not going to do, we don't need to have a conversation about here, but it informs the understanding of the overall challenge. I think it's helpful. Susan walks me through these things. Same thing is true with the provost, and everybody who works with me understands that we have a process through which Regents go to work with folks. It has to do with committee structure and how we efficiently allocate scarce resource of time of leadership. At the same time, anytime a Regent has a question, it gets answered. And the goal is to answer it quickly and on the spot in a way that is puts the issue either to rest or informs in such a way that we have a productive conversation. These are really technical issues that take time to understand. And particularly when you have a lay board who over time comes to understand the intricacies of a system that's not like business, but is like a university. It just, there's an education process, that, especially given the transformations in which we've been engaged.
Okay. FB1, we have a motion by George for approval of, operating budget revisions. Do I have a second?
Oh, second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We have 3.
Yep.
All right, the motion carries. On to FP2, approval of personnel actions.
I promise I won't ask.
I was gonna say,
Don't worry, I will not say nothing.
okay,
no
so,
worries.
since the last meeting, Regent McKinney and I spoke about the format of the personnel actions and made some minor modifications so that what he asked for me to do is sort it in such a way that the highest rise to the top, so that the regents would probably put more scrutiny on the larger compensation and personnel type actions. So really, that's the only change that we made to both the personnel actions and the one-time payments. So you'll see the dates that they run through. And again, both of the reports are in descending order and subtotaled as well by individual.
Anybody have any questions on?
I move to accept.
All right, got a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor of FB2, signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? That motion carries. All right. On to FB3, acceptance of auditors' reports and financial statements for WKYU TV and WKYU FM radio.
Okay, I'm just going to say a few high-level statements, and then I'll turn it over to our auditor. So again, the same as was the case with our university's audit. It was a clean audit with an unqualified opinion. That's the best we can get. No audit findings. And again, I'll turn it over to Brad Shirley, who is our managing director from Pro.
Good morning. Thank you. Glad to be here again to walk through the financial statements, some highlights. If we have a slideshow or.
I'm sorry, Brad.
Walking through the financial statements of the TV and radio station. So I have a brief presentation here. I do have copies of financial statements as well if you have any questions on those. But again, the main deliverables here that you'll see are the actual audited financial statements for WKYU TV, WKYU FM radio. If you look at the actual financial statements, they've gotten to be quite thick over the past few years with the requirement to include more information about pensions, all of the background and assumptions that go into that. We also do a certification for the CPB, so you're required to submit certain financial information and other information online. And we do a certification of that as well. This just kind of gives you a high level of some of the methodology and approach that we take. Again, similar approach that we do for the university, just obviously on a much smaller scale as we're just the stations themselves. As far as reporting these, just a little bit of timeline here. So they were issued in December for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2019. Again, I mentioned the certification required by the CPB that was completed earlier this month within the timeline. And as Susan mentioned, we do have unmodified opinions on both sets of the financial statements, so clean financial statements from that standpoint. This just gives a little bit of information on the financial balances and transactions during the year. So you didn't have to look through the full financial statements necessarily. The top section here is for the TV station. And again, comparing to the two most recent fiscal year ends. The bottom section is for FM radio. As you look at the top section, key things here really, you'll see the TV net position. That's essentially your equity is a negative position again, as it has been the past few years. That's again due to the pension and OPEB requirements to include those liabilities on there. And so if you think about the overall university liabilities for those, A portion of that gets allocated to the TV and radio based on the number of employees. And so you'll see that impact there. As you look at the revenue and expenses, again, for the TV there in the upper third, you see TV revenue actually increased a little bit this year, year over year, so a positive sign there. The expenses increased pretty significantly, but pretty much all of that increase in expense is again related to pension and OPEB changes there. So there's a combination of factors that go into that, whether it's the overall liability increasing, and so you're seeing some impact there. There's also some of that is related to the percentage that's allocated. So depending on how many total university employees there are compared to the TV employees, that allocation percentage can increase or decrease as well. A little bit of that. It changes in the overall university employees, but TV was more consistent. So that change in net position was a decrease this year of about 661,000, but again, a lot of that is what I would call non-cash right now. Change as it relates to the pension OPEB. The bottom half of the screen here again is and you'll see again here they're in a little bit better position just overall in your net position. You have a positive this year of 16,000. Good to see. While the revenue decreased slightly for FM radio, you'll see that the expenses really slightly increased, but again, when you take out the pension and OPEB piece of that, your operating, what I'll call operating expenses actually decreased. And so you'll see a positive change in net assets again this year of about $100,000. This is a little bit of information that we're required to communicate as part of the audit process. Again, we do the audit under generally accepted auditing standards and under government auditing standards for the TV and radio as it's part of the university. As you look at significant accounting policies, there really weren't any new significant accounting policies this year that were required externally, nothing new internally either. There are significant estimates that are involved primarily in this pension and OPEB that we've talked about. There were no significant auditor's judgments or any inconsistencies in the way that transactions were reported. And again, no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal controls that we identified. This is really the last bit of information, again, required communication. Key things here, posted adjustments. Those would be any adjustments that we identified through the audit process and were significant enough or material enough to be required to be posted. There were none of those. Then waived adjustments would be anything that we identified as a misstatement or adjustment that was maybe a little bit lesser amount that you could choose to waive, and there were none of those either. So really no misstatements of any type through the audit process. And then the other communications, just a variety of things. Again, no disagreements, no difficulties that we incurred through the audit process. It's a very smooth and clean audit process. So thank Emily and David, especially for the assistance throughout the process to get the audits completed and the certification. Any questions for me?
All right, if I have no questions, I'll entertain a motion to accept the auditor's reports. I've got a motion. David has to abstain. Yes.
Second.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Note the extension. Note the extension.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the final item on our agenda is at B4, acceptance of the 2019-2020 first quarter statement of revenues.
So I think as I talked about at one of the prior meetings, Regent McKinney and I had talked about this report needing a lot of work. And the report itself really wasn't telling us much, especially when we just have 1 year. And so you all will see from the report that we've added the prior year. So you have a comparison from prior year. And then we also reformatted it so that the expenditures are shown in the same way that our financial statements are shown by PCS code, which is a program classification structure. Again, standard way that your financial statements are made, and a lot of financial reporting that we do to the state. Yeah, I think this gives you a little more information. My goal is with the new budgeting software, one of the things that I'm really excited about is the reporting capability out of it. I think it will give the board a much better flavor as to the financial condition of the university. It also does forecasting for us, so we would be able to forecast through the end of the year. I just think those type of capabilities, beyond the capabilities that it's going to give the deans and the provost in the ramp model, I think the financial modeling and reporting is going to be really, really very good for particularly the board. So tuition and fees, looking at the report, it appears as if they're tracking slightly below prior year. The reason that is that we started the semester a week later than last year. So in December of last year, we had already collected some spring tuition that had not been collected in this year. So again, something I told Klaus yesterday is that tuition and fee line in the revenue, we're a tuition dependent university. So that's the number that if there's any problems, going to keep me up at night. In the fall, it looked as if we were tracking very closely to budget, and we ended up very, 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 really spot on budget. And that's because of the looking at, rather than head count, looking at net tuition revenue and the great job that our enrollment management folks did in recruiting more out-of-state students. So the word that I got from Brian is that the spring looks healthy enrollment. So I would expect as we monitor budget versus actual every month, that we'll get a better idea of how we're tracking for the year as we move along through the year. But for now, the second quarter, that slightly below is really an issue of timing with tuition.
But it is the same percentage of budget as 2019.
Yeah. I mean, it's very close, but the actuals would, if we had started the semester, if we had started the semester the same time we had last year, you would have seen more actuals. State appropriation is on target. We're the second quarter allotment draw, we're now at 55%, so we're on track there. Other revenues, again, rather than a few timing issues, we're on track. And again, the other revenue category is primarily made up, athletics is in there, a lot of your revenue dependent programs are in there. So if their revenue is not on track, their expenditures would be down as well. So they would offset one another from a financial statement. Restricted grants and contracts, slightly lower than prior year, again, due to timing. And auxiliary, again, some timing issues. Expenditures, unrestricted, tracking with the prior year second quarter, we're at 44.6% of budget. The good news of that is that you would think at the second quarter, if you were spending all of your budget, you would be at 50%. So that's good that we're tracking below. But I know that I really want to push hard the university. So be patient with me as the provost and I look at positions. I really want to push hard for the remainder of the 6 months to really, really push hard to save as much money as we can. And again, the restricted, they're driven by the revenue we received, and the auxiliary, it's really good. Is the expenditures are 3.5% below what they were last year. So I think overall we seem to be tracking well at the second quarter. It's just going to be important for us to put up like I said, the last 6 months, it's just making sure that we're managing our budgets very, very closely and monitoring on a monthly basis. I think that's all I have.
Susan, can I say something?
Oh.
So what's happened over the past few years is that as we become more and more cognizant of how we lot of times we just say, well, we're not gonna do this, like, we're sitting on positions, we haven't made decisions about filling positions, because we're not sure if it's necessary, if now is the time, we wanna wait for the Simpson project, report to see if the salaries are correct, right? So we're not spending that money, but what the result is gonna be is that our carry forward, it's gonna be reflected in the carry forward. Because if we don't spend those dollars, next year, we're gonna come back with another 30 million, and you're gonna go, well, why aren't we spending our money? But it's all part of this transition, I think, to the new budget model, and thinking about how we use our dollars. And not spending it in one place doesn't mean that we won't ultimately make a decision about it, because really, this is an opportunity for us to take those dollars and put them in a place where, move them to a place where maybe we get a better return on the investment when we spend it there. So I guess I just wanted to say that about the carry forward, because I know a lot of that comes from academic affairs, but a lot of it is because we have been very careful in how we spend our money, rather than buying T-shirts and paper at the end of the year. You know, you don't want to do that. That feels to me like an irresponsible thing to do. But then we've got these unfilled positions, lapsed dollars are represented in those carry forward numbers. And then commitments that we made that cross over the fiscal year are in there as well. So startup packages for recruiting new faculty, grants for RCAP and FUSE projects. All that stuff carries over the fiscal year, so we have those dollars still sitting there, and it appears to be extra, it appears to be carried forward when actually it's committed. I just wanted to say that.
Any further questions or discussions on this action item? All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. We have, does everybody want to take a break? You can go on for a little while. Or you want power through?
Well,
Just got one more item.
We just have a little more, item. Very good. Power through.
Thank you, Brian.
Look, I'm excited today to introduce Robert Unseld. Robert wears many hats within the Division of Enrollment Student Experience. Most importantly, he's the director of our Student Accessibility Resource Center. He's also the within the division, our director for strategic planning and innovation. We have been working and developing a esports team for the last several years. And I thought it'd be very appropriate to ask Robert to kind of talk about that and introduce some of our students that are involved with that program.
PowerPoint going here. And thank you. Good mid-morning afternoon to everyone. I'm just going to spend the next 90 to 120 minutes. No.
I've been given strict instructions.
Strict instructions. No, I'm going to try to quickly get you kind of up to speed about our esports program. And then we've been lucky. We put out a call to our players to show up, and we've had 4 of our student players / coaches / administrative group here. And so I'll kind of walk you through it, and then they can share their experience. So just to kind of let you know, right now, our program has 31 students involved, most of which are on scholarship. It's led by myself and then Dr. Patricia Todd from the College of Business. She is a good faculty support and asset to us. And I want to talk to you a little bit about our teams. So the program overall has 31 students, but we compete in 3 games, and they are Overwatch, Rocket League, and League of Legends. And to keep this short, I'll just kind of give you a brief overview of what they are, and then if you have more questions, we'll do them at the end. Overwatch is a game where it's a first person capture the objective. So our team works together, going through maps, looking through the eyes of the actual characters to either capture a flag or to defend the target. League of Legends is a top-down strategy game. And so our team works together, again, working through a map in a capture the flag type of environment. Each of the players play a different role, And together, when they achieve that game, they kind of get victory. And then our most complicated is Rocket League, which is soccer with cars. And so this is where we are competing. Now, when we say this, we're competing digitally. And so we have our esports arena graciously hosted now by Housing and Residence Life in McCormick Hall. We have 24 machines down there. Our players meet down there and they compete together online against other academic institutions in different conferences and tournaments that have been set up. When we look at what are the goals, our players' goals many times are to win the game. They want to bring prestige to the university. We have some rivalries with pointed winners with LSU over a gaming dispute a couple last season. So our players want to beat them really bad, of course. But for us as a division, our goals are also in the recruitment and retention space. And so let's take a look at this. From fall to spring, we've had 96% retention for our players. Now, we do have a couple players that have some academic challenges, and we'll be addressing that in the spring. But overall, the program is driving students to come back to Western Kentucky University. To go a little bit further, our average GPA for our program was 3.0 last semester. So our players are performing, I guess, in the digital arena, and they are also performing here on campus. And then finally, our recruitment efforts are gearing up with our tryouts on February 28th, the first of 3 different tryouts that'll occur on Saturdays, and we have a recruitment visit on the 21st. Our team, some of these folks, are also meeting with admissions later today to help us fully flush out this recruitment schedule for this year. And then in future years, we plan on moving this earlier and earlier and earlier as we turn kind of this passion for gaming into an infrastructure for success. And so with that said, I want to talk about 2 more things. One, connectedness. This whole program arose from a club idea back in 2014 that then grew in strength to an esports idea 3 years ago. And it's mostly for a population of students that exist on our campus. They perform well, but they do struggle with connectedness given their interests and the university's traditional offerings of opportunities to get connected. So the niche we are trying to fulfill is keeping these students who want to be here connected to the university and growing this out to where folks who don't feel like they have a place where they can fit in directly will have a place where they can fit in directly. And to further that, I'm going to ask our coach of League of Legends, Jessica Manrow, to come up and talk a little bit about the sisterhood grant that's along the same vein.
All right.
My name's Jessica Manrow, and I was working very closely with Dr. Patricia Todd and trying to figure out if we could do some research on gender equity within the collegiate esports scene and seeing how we can have a more inclusive and diverse space within the esports program here at WKU. And so we decided to approach the sisterhood and seeing if they would allow us to apply for a grant. And we were very fortunate that we did get the grant, and I'll explain a little bit about what we had applied for. So we have noticed that there is a problem in collegiate esports with inclusiveness and diversity in regards to females coming and playing for collegiate teams. And we decided that we would set this up in 2 parts. The first part is research, where we would go across the nation to different institutions and see how they foster diversity, how they foster inclusiveness. And we would come back, and in the second part, we would take that to action here on campus and become a forefront university in driving this within our program. The second part of that action was we were going to make a women in esports, I guess it would be a club, that would go alongside with the program. So we are very excited to get started with the research, and we are excited to get started with creating that opportunity for women here on campus and for many other students here on campus to be a part of that. Thank you.
I skipped the slide. I want to go back to it. The one thing I also want to talk about is our focus on making sure that we are getting our students something out of it outside of just the competition. So these games require a lot of teamwork, collaboration, and the development of leadership skills. We are creating opportunities for our players to transition just from competitors to team captains and potentially player coaches as they move through this process, so we can facilitate skill development and all those other things. And I will say to you this, the leadership is not only what we're teaching, but it's also a role we're playing in the state and in the region. Dr. Todd and I have been working with other schools who are interested in starting these programs. We have moved into, I think we have a bit of a first mover advantage with esports when it comes to the scene in Kentucky. There's only one team that really has an established program, and it's not to the scale of Western Kentucky University in terms of student population. And in the region, we are moving forward. So as we think about what esports means at WKU, it is an opportunity for our students to get connected. It's an opportunity for us to teach leadership and critical thinking. And it's also an opportunity for us to stand out on the regional stage as a university that is innovating in the places where students want to be. And so what I'd like to do is I'll bring our players up here. I'll introduce them. You too, Thomas. So, so this is John Hay. I'm sorry, John. I'm so a little nervous. You know, I watched The Crown. When you address the monarch, sometimes you get a little jumpy. A little later, we'll introduce themselves and tell their role with our program.
Hello, my name is John Hasner. I've been a part of the program. This is my 4th semester now. I'm currently on our A team for our Overwatch team.
I'm Haley Ray. This is my 2nd semester on the team, and I'm on the B team, hopefully the A team soon, of our Overwatch team.
My name is Thomas Gambler. I joined in fall of 2017 as a player, then moved up to a coach for my senior year, and now I'm a graduate assistant, helps coordinate our 3 teams and coaches.
And not to forget Jessica over there, who is also in our doctoral program here at WKU.
Yes, I'm in the organizational leadership program here at WKU, and this is my many year. I don't know, however many years we've had this program active. So thank you.
So,
Where are you all from and what are you majoring in?
So I'm from Louisville, and then I heard about this school and my senior year of high school and came here, loved this place so much. And then my major is paralegal studies. I am actually applying for law school here for next semester.
I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, and my major is management with a concentration in HR.
I'm from Princeton, Kentucky, a small town farther west of here. And I am currently in the graduate program for student affairs. Stuck around because of the impact that esports have had on me and wanting to continue to pursue this.
What do you find most enjoyable about the esports?
Other than the game, obviously, which we play a lot of, it's kind of like the friendships that you make within that. Because the people that are on the team now, many of them were on the team last semester, and we've kind of like really created a bond together. Every single week we hang out outside of practices. We are in constant communication with one another, and it kind of feels like I've created some really, really good relationships with some people that I never would have met otherwise. And I'm actually living with 3 of the people on the team because we all decided to get an apartment together because we just really like being around each other.
I would agree because it's more than just the in-game and the in-practice time, because the people on the team will go to the gym together, we'll study together, we'll craft food together. And so, as Mr. Unzel was talking about, this is a community where sometimes it's hard to reach out because everything you do is online, but it gives you an opportunity to make real in-person connections to people. And college is lonely, it can be, and so it gives you a group of people that love the same thing as you.
I would echo exactly what they said. I mean, I've stuck around for about 3 years now, made friends with a lot of the players whenever I started in undergrad. And then moving up, I just really grew a passion for this program. And also it kind of, for me, like going into student affairs, it showed me how helpful a community can be and how helpful that support can be when you're an undergrad that I hadn't really considered before, because I'd done like freshman, sophomore year, I've been very alone on a lot of things. I went through it and it helped a ton junior and senior year. And I just wanted to continue to, help this program for that, because there's a lot of people like me that wouldn't really consider a lot of other programs that we have, but something like this is something that kind of takes a lot of people who usually spend more introverted time and gets them in a community.
I like everything I hear about this, and I remember reading several years ago how important this was as a means of learning too. And so it's really fascinating to hear you all talk. The picture does not reflect diversity in the group, though. Any comments about that?
Well, about a year and a half ago, when we had kind of revitalized the team, because during the transition between presidents and all, the team got lost in the shuffle. Dr. Cavoni and Brian both made an effort to bring this team back to life and full-fledged into finance. So we took kind of our lead last year to give you a sense of what we did. Last year, we had one program that we called our premier program, which is our Overwatch team. Overwatch is a game where 6 players compete. And so you have an A team, and then you have a B team, so you can have scrimmages and practice. For the most part, that team was all male, and we may have had one student that we would traditionally call a minority student on that team at some point. And I think they may have left before we actually started season A.
I believe we had 2 at that time.
We had 2 at that time. Okay. So we decided then that it was not only important to us as a university that values diversity to make an effort, but it's also important for the longevity of the program to make moves in that arena. So things we've done is we've grown the size of the team. We've made an active effort to recruit folks who do not look like the current team, because we want the aspirational team we have is one that is reflective of our values here at diversity. Dr. Todd, myself and Jessica, and I think Thomas was around, made an effort that women in esports would become one of the founding principles of the esports effort. So Dr. Todd and Jessica put together a grant, Sisterhood grant, that's funding us on that. The student organization is the second half of that piece. And the other thing that we learned from the club before we had a formal esports team is that in a lot of these games, especially Overwatch, where you have to pay to play, some of our students haven't made that investment to be competitive, but they do still have a passion for gaming. And so the other thing we're trying to reestablish is to get the club going again, to get the folks who may not have had the money. The machines we play on are not what you pick up at Best Buy. They're very expensive machines. We've had to have data in that space upgraded to support the competitive load. And so for a lot of players in high school or at home, unless they have family that makes that financial investment, they don't get to play at a competitive level. So what we need is we're going to create another club to go along. So folks who didn't have the money to play at that level before can come here and use our machines when we're not using it and be a part of this community. Because we have to grow it not only in the competitive realm, but also in the student success realm and the student involvement realm.
Did you create like an intramural sports league where students could create teams and compete against each other?
We're working on that. You know, when we think about our ambitions, we have met with our folks down at Campus Recreation and Wellness about kind of creating an intramural sport league. To be honest, we're trying to figure out how to manage it. Something you should know about esports is, unlike other competitive collegiate play, we don't necessarily have a national organization we can tap into for everything. So for example, the organization that we conduct our tournaments through Overwatch with is different than the one we use for League of Legends or for Rocket League. And even within the state, a lot of it is piecemeal and kind of pulled together just by the ambitions and passions of our players and our coaches. And so as we're trying to build out that infrastructure, we think intramural play is a big part of it. It's just trying to manage time and resources to get us there, but that is on our roadmap.
How do you choose what games you're going to
Well,
concentrate on?
I wish there was a clean answer to that. So Overwatch was one of our legacy games from the program before, and so we stayed with it. During our Overwatch tryouts, there became a groundswell in the community for Rocket League. And so we thought, let's adopt a Rocket League team, and those were our 2 teams last year. At the end of last year and the beginning of this year, we took a look at what was happening in the high school athletic space, and they are competing in both Rocket League and League of Legends. And we had a League of Legends team before. That's initially where we started. That team had fallen off, and we decided to bring that team back because we do feel like we need to be aligned with what's happening in the high school athletics in Kentucky. This to be something that can be sustainable. Now, when we look at other games, we do look at the games not only based on how competitive they are, but also if the games reflect the value that's indicative of the university. So there are some games that have a lot of support, but the way that the gameplay is conducted and the characters in the game, it gets into areas that we don't feel like are in line with our values. And so we do not compete in those games. So we kind of take it case by case. As the sport evolves and as the program evolves, we probably will make game changes in what direction we're going, but we are always trying to keep our eyes open and figure out what positions us well as a university and what also maintains the community environment that we're trying to have with our players.
I just want to say something really quick, if I can. I had Dr. Todd for a marketing class last semester, who is one of the coaches. And Dr. Todd is an amazing individual who really talked a lot about the program as a whole. And I think this is a tremendous opportunity for our students. And as you all can see from the numbers displayed on the screen, an effective retention tool for students as well. This is something that, you know, it's new to a lot of people, but people in my generation, this is a very, you know, common thing. You know, gaming is a huge industry and a very large untapped market for universities. So I think it's amazing that we offer this program, and Dr. Todd's even expanding this on the institutional level, where next semester she will be offering a marketing gaming class, which is going to be quite interesting. I 100% intend on enrolling in that course. And I think it's a neat tool for our students to have. So it's an amazing program, and I'm very glad that you all are at the board meeting today, and thank you all for attending.
Yeah, I have two sons who play these games, and so I'm somewhat familiar with that. They try to recruit me to play with them. It makes me feel old and slow because I just I also teach a lot of the Gap students, and I would think that at least a third of them, if not half of them, are actually playing one of those games. I don't know if you have reached ever out to the Gatton Academy.
Well, I'm glad you brought them up. The Gatton Academy made a big portion of our team last year and the year before.
The year I joined, I was the only non-Gatton student on the team at the time.
Well, and to go along with that, we were able to retain a couple of those Gatton students to come back to WKU the following year. And they told us the differentiator for them was the esports community. And so we're always looking out for the Gatton folks to come and join us. You know, it's a little tricky with them because they had closed weekends. So other than that, they're
The other question I have, what type of scholarships are you actually offering for this program?
So right now we do a $1,500 one-year scholarship for our players, $750 in fall and $750 in spring. We're probably going to stay at that level. For our player coaches, we do a little bit more because they make a bigger investment in the program and they help us lead it. And then of course, Thomas is a graduate assistant through our program.
Okay. Very, very quick comment. I was at a national conference in DC earlier this week, and the Pew Research tied to the game has hit our radar. 5 years ago, the percentages were much different than they are today, and the most significant change has been in the growth of women that have identified as gamers. Now, this is just a coincidence that I got this. So we are very interested in this market segment. I applaud the effort to go for the sisterhood grant because that represents data that I just heard 3 days ago. Also, it looks like we are recruiting students in the proper geography based on this availability, because you've got Louisville, Nashville, Princeton, so we're covering small towns, metropolitan areas, large growth areas, and I applaud the efforts on gender and equity and diversity in that growth path. So it fits with the national data that I heard earlier this week.
If I may, I had the great pleasure of going to visit a practice earlier in the fall semester. This is not Pong or Atari, I can guarantee you. And they were very patient with me, but it is an incredible group of young people that we want to grow exponentially over time. When you think about the work that we're doing as an institution around creating anchors, social integration, academic integration, how it all works together. And I think what you heard there is the precursor to the first year village. Imagine a living learning community where these young people are in the same physical space. They have peer mentors, they have faculty advisors, they engage in the same things.
And it's for a population of students that sometimes, we had a conversation when I visited, can feel isolated. And creating opportunities for them outside of electronic engagement to have personal relationships that are good for their mental health, for their academic success, and for their retention. It's exactly the work that we've done in other areas as well. And so as a self-proclaimed, by myself and others, nerd, investment in forensics, in our journalism and media programs. You think about band as a tool for recruitment and retention, esports. Everything that we do as an institution is focused on the success of our young people and recruiting more of them. And this is a competitive advantage for WKU. It's creating a platform for us to talk nationally about what this means for the future of both competition, but also higher education. And I'm thankful for all of the work that's happened in student experience, but also for the investment of time and energy of our players too. And we're trying to get them gear so they can walk around campus with esports all over them and backpacks and stuff.
Again, forming those relationships, and they can be student, faculty, student, whatever, but that is the key to a lot of things in life, and certainly retention. I would be very curious to know what percentage of that group are night owls, and what percentage. I bet most of them are night owls.
Do you all sleep at night?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like my.
Good, they're sleepers.
Well, maybe they're morning alarms. Anyway, that's time for study.
I will tell you that the amount of caffeine that I saw consumed in that room, though, I felt very much at home. I don't know who we're going to get to sponsor the team, but we have lots of opportunity there. Certainly with caffeinated beverages and other sponsors.
Does anyone else have any comments or questions? I'm going to thank everyone. Thank you all for coming. This is what it's all about. I always say I'm the chair of the best committee that reports to the Board of Regents because we get to see students. Robert, you did a great job. In fact, and actually, Dr. Boney, he was talking about Monarch. Doing present was really about me and not about you. And Brian, thank you. I'm teasing a little bit. And Brian, thank you as always. I don't know how you could possibly retire in 5 months. We have this going on. I'm sure it's going to be.
None of
wonderful.
them good people like Robert. It's,
Well, thank you all. You just made my day. Thank you.
That concludes our business.
We do have lunch if anyone would like to grab lunch outside.
I'll take some.
Nicely done, Jason.
Good job, Jason. Yeah.
I try. Not every time.